Hi guys, welcome to episode 79 of The Green Life. Today's episode is a solo with me, and we're going to talk about relationships, and we're going to talk about boundaries in relationships, and those really encompass everything, friendships, romantic relationships, family, very importantly. Actually, as always, I draw from my experience, and then I kind of talk about what I've learned from coaching clients, from talking to friends, from just learning from experts that are really specializing in these kind of relationships and the boundaries that are necessary for any relationship to work. I haven't done this for a while. I haven't done a solo episode for a while, and I kind of miss it, but I always feel that I want to come to you with something of substance when I do, because I have the tendency of talking a lot to begin with, and I want to make sure that I can give you information that you can walk around with or walk out with and actually ponder and really, have that introspection that is necessary if we want to grow as people, if we want to heal trauma. And we all have trauma. We all have things that we need to work on, that we have to heal. And sometimes they are so deeply rooted that we don't actually realize that we have these traumas. And sometimes the triggers come to us, we don't know the triggers, and then they kind of start that wheel of self-discovery, crisis, and I think, also then that fork in our life where we either take the path of self-discovery and really going deep and actually healing, or we choose avoidance and we try and not really think about it, and these traumas just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think not only emotionally, but actually physically, a lot of people that get sick, maybe the issue is not even what they're eating or the environment or toxins per se in that aspect, but it's actually the trauma that has gone so deep at cellular level. Because we don't often realize that our conscious mind can justify anything we do, anything we think, anything we feel can be justified. However, our subconscious really takes in the information at a different level. And so when we are pushing it back and rejecting working on certain things, the subconscious can do nothing but keep them there and allow them to grow and grow and grow, and then create different pathways. I mean, if you think about it, we don't know much about the brain when it really comes to anything. Medicine is very backward when it comes to our, neurological system, but it's especially the brain. And so our consciousness and our subconscious are such huge topics that are really, really untapped into, because it's really hard. But one of the things that they started finding out in neuroplasticity is that, I apologize for my noise, is that we create connections when something happens. And when we make these connections, when we create these connections that are called, is part of neuroplasticity. So we make these new pathways. We create connections that we didn't have before. So that happens in our subconscious as well, for sure. And so when we are pushing down trauma, those links become deeper and deeper, and actually you connected to new experiences, which perhaps are traumatic in a different way, but remind our subconscious of the old trauma. And so those triggers happen, and we actually don't realize that unless we really go deep into our subconscious and we try to deeply heal these wounds. So when it comes to relationships, I'm going to start with my family, because as always, I talk about my experience and my story. So if you heard the episodes that I've done before about my story, I shared that I grew up with parents that were not ready to be parents. At some point, at some level, still not ready to be parents. They were just not ready to be parents because they were too young, for one, both of them, and immature. But also they had trauma and issues which were not healed. And although I mentioned that when I talked about ancestral healing, I mentioned that there is obviously ancestral healing to be done within a family. Since I've done my constellation therapy, I must say I've found out that I've actually healed some things already. And somehow at some level, I haven't really been speaking to my mother since last year, 2022, January or February. And in a way, that's been really, really healing for both of us, actually. But in the interim, I actually did the constellations and some of the ancestral healing. And with that kind of medicine that goes deep at cellular level and also ethereally, spiritually, I think there were messages that were sent to my mom, because she actually this year has been working on her health in a very different way, stopping the sleeping pills, becoming a little more self-responsible and having more accountability, looking at, from a distance, probably looking at what I'm doing, but also looking at herself. And, I think she heard a lot of episodes, from what I understand from my siblings, but she heard some episodes where, I was discussing with Dr. Northrop about the traumas and energy vampires and narcissism and so many things that, for me, they came up when I broke up with my mom. And I feel that since processing what she probably heard, she's been taking accountability, as I have on my side, for my own healing as well. And I think at some level, these conversations and the ancestral medicine truly helped, because she has been really taking responsibility for her health at a very different level, which I'm actually very proud of. And I told her. So she has been asking me questions about herbs, about detoxes, about food, to which I actually always reply, because although I don't want a relationship right now, I still want her to thrive. Because one of the things that made me sad, and I think one of the things that really broke that relationship, and I'm going to talk about the boundaries and our roles in relationships in just a minute, is that I felt like I was the mother for a very long time, which it was an inherently pushed on me kind of role that, when I did the ancestral healing, made a lot of sense. And when I kind of stepped away from certain words, certain thoughts, certain beliefs, that's a very important one, and I started actually putting these things in order, the truth is that the hierarchy is as follows: my grandmother, my mother, me, and anyone else in between. But my grandmother was my mother. She acted many times as my mother. She was the person I was closest to, but I am a mom. So putting order in that hierarchy, I think, really, really helped, because it created, I think ancestrally, it just created a little bit of order. And so seeing my mother taking responsibility as an adult, right, for herself, it's already a step forward into the healing. And I think that will allow her to be a good mom at some point, whether it's to me or just to my brother and my sister, whoever, it doesn't matter. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what our relationship will look like in a few years. I miss her sometimes, of course. And I definitely have much less anger, or no anger. I have very much love for her, and I want it to be well. So when I look back, obviously, there's trauma there, but my father is not really doing any work. But I think that what happened is, because their traumas were not healed, they created a family dynamic which was very unstable, but also the roles in our family they were really skewed. My mother was the child that was never tended to by her parents, because she went to boarding school. She didn't like boarding school. She felt abandoned. I love these kind of settings, like put me in a uniform, put me like in a girls' school. I'm super happy, but she wasn't. So that was traumatic for her. And the trauma was, my parents don't love me, so they leave me here and they abandon me. My dad wasn't very nurturing. He was, having a life on his own outside the relationship with my mom. So women here, women there. So my mom felt abandoned. And I think, again, the lack of maturity at that age, I mean, she was 18, 19, right, in the early 20s. And, she was looking for love that my dad couldn't give, because he didn't know how to love. And so in that dynamic, when everybody was kind of doing their own thing, I became the parent And I was given responsibilities that a child shouldn't have. But I also was given a role, and this was never spoken like, oh, you're going to play the mom or you're going to play the big sister. That, well, actually, yes, that was given to me, but you're responsible for your sister, which again created a very distorted relationship with my sister, because becoming responsible for somebody else means that that person is seen not to be responsible, which is not true, but also creates trauma for that person and insecurities. So for her whole life, my sister hasn't had the strength that she needed to create boundaries, to say no. At the same time, she created a lot of anger within herself, because there was a lot of unprocessed stuff that she's still working on now. And I think she still has to go deeply into many, many things. This is not joke work. I mean, and the thing is this, the first step is that you can learn about it. So we can talk about it, you can learn about it, and something clicks and you're like, yeah, that's me. And you can even understand where certain things come from. But that's the easy part. I know it doesn't sound like the easy part, but actually acknowledging it is the easy part. The hard part, however, becomes taking responsibility and working on it and actually applying the theory to change something, like materially change something. And that is the one that takes a lot of work. Why? Because we create a lot of habits that are fostered around what we've always known. So the nature versus nurture kind of argument, right? The nurture that and made us who we are is the pathways are created around that nurture, which is your role is the parent. You are responsible for other people, for yourself, for other people as well. And you don't really have space even to just, be who you are. So it becomes, and this becomes a bigger conversation when we talk about, our human designs. But I'm going to just start with, with this trauma not being actually healed, and with the nurturing of certain pathways and certain behaviors, we become, and we're told we have a role, and that becomes who we are until we work on it. And of course, when those relationships happen, when those relationships where the roles are distorted, like mother is child, the child is mother, for example, in my case, the boundaries are flaky or inexistent. Because how can you have boundaries if you don't have the right order, right? What do you put boundaries to? So I never had boundaries. I never have ever had boundaries. In fact, most of my life, because I didn't have boundaries, I was a people pleaser. And the other thing that made me become a people pleaser is because people who don't have boundaries also judge the people that perhaps at some level want to have boundaries. So for example, at some point, if I would say, yeah, but I want to do something for me, because if I'm not happy, I don't really want to work on making another person happy. Now, I maybe didn't know how to communicate this in words, and I didn't know where this came from, and I didn't know how to translate what I was feeling, because again, I didn't have the tools. And this is really, I'm talking teenage years, early, like just out of childhood, teenage. I mean, you're still a child until 25, really, but you know what I mean? Childhood and teenage years. And I was told when I had this conversation, like, but I want to do something for me first. Oh, you're selfish. And so now, where do you put the boundary? Because when you want to do something, someone tells you that that's wrong and you're a bad person, you're selfish. And then you really don't have the tools to deal with it when you're that young, and when nobody around you is helping you to figure it out. And I think another thing that happened is I was a very sensitive child, like very, very sensitive. I could feel things around me, lots of energy. I could see things that were maybe not visible to everybody. I had a very, very strong intuition, and I had a very huge creativity. I mean, I was really creative. But the trauma that I had in my family life kind of battered that part of me. So I had to become very grounded. I had to become responsible. I had to become solution oriented at some level. And again, as a child, you don't know what solutions are, but I'm just saying you find practical things to happen. And that practicality and that reality or realism or was in conflict with my creativity, because at some level I wanted to have I wanted to believe in something magic, and I always did believe in something magic. But then the voice that was very strong within me would say, you have to be practical and you have to be grounded. Don't be out with the fairies, right? I love being out with the fairies, but yeah, I couldn't. I had to be practical and grounded because I was responsible for other people and I was responsible for myself. Now, I did not share this in the episode that I recorded before, I don't think, but I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But basically, I also rescued my mom's life twice, which as a child, just I would say I was maybe 8 or 9, or maybe 7 or 8. I don't even remember, but very, very young. It's just so blurry, but I remember the circumstances that would happen. I remember what I did. I remember how I felt, but I can't remember the age. But once I came back from school and I found my mom in bed and she had slit her wrists open. I don't think she did it as deeply as she probably wanted to. I don't know if it was because she didn't have the courage, because it hurt too much. But I found her in bed, just basically bleeding. And I called my grandmother. My grandmother called someone to assist, and we took my mom to the hospital. And she actually was admitted for a psychological review because she attempted suicide. So they wanted to make sure that she was not depressed, which she was. And she was going through a breakdown. She was, because she just wasn't happy. And she did not have the support around her, because even in the circumstance, I remember my grandmother was actually not feeling sorry and compassion for my mom. She was angry at my mom for doing this because she felt that my mom had put her in a position where she had to be ashamed of herself. Because my grandmother grew up being made feel guilty and responsible and an adult at a very young age. And I mentioned this in the ancestral healing episode. I don't know what happened to her specifically when she was a child. Something horrible could have happened to her. I don't know, but there was definitely a lot of trauma there, a lot of anger that, in a way, again, the ancestral is very, very powerful, because the way certain behaviors of her, I definitely recognize in myself, and we never talked about it. But, the being responsible, grounded, responsible for everyone, doing everything for everyone, making sure everything is perfectly fine, like nothing is out of place, coping with situations that sometimes are extreme. And so those behaviors are not, like, it's funny because they come from somewhere, and definitely trauma. But I definitely felt at at cellular level, I have the traumas my grandmother had. And so I'm healing those traumas for her as well. So, because in different dimensions, she still exists at some level, maybe even in the physical form. I don't know, but there are so many levels we don't know about. So I'm not going to take anything for granted. So my mother was made feel guilty about it, but she really was meant to break down to be kind of really born again. Because when she came out of the breakdown, she was a better person for a very long time. She was stronger. She was taking accountability. She was learning new things. But, if you don't surround yourself by the right food, physical, mental, spiritual, you're not going to be able to blossom, even if you're doing the work. So this is why it's so multi-level and so very, very hard. So I found her and I saved her life once. And she always used to say it. And even as I grew up, she used to say it. Like she had in her mind also put me on a pedestal for doing that. And then the second time was she was feeling incredible pain in her tummy area and uterus area. And my father would not take her to the hospital. He was watching TV and he did not want to do it. And I knew something was wrong. And again, I didn't know what. I wasn't even knowledgeable about the body. I just knew her tummy was sore. She really wasn't moving. And I called my grandmother again, and they took her to the hospital. And the doctor said, good grief, she's bleeding internally. And if you hadn't taken her here, she would have been dead within half an hour. So again, she associated me with saving her life. And I think because of that, as I grew older, and she obviously was very close to me and I was very close to her, I became the person she was dependent on because I was dependable. And that skewed our relationship because I never felt like I had a mom, but also growing up wanting and needing a mom, especially as a teenager, I did not have a mom because she was never given the opportunity to actually be it. And I need to say she was not able to do it because she didn't have the tools and she wasn't given the opportunity to do it. Because at the same time, I grew up with a character and with a role that I fulfilled, because how do you know that that's not your role, right? I only discovered these things like literally in my late, like at 39, turning 40, when I truly, from 38 to 40, I broke down. I broke down. And although that was painful because I broke down physically, giving myself type 2 diabetes, I had anxiety, I had adrenal fatigue. I also broke down spiritually because of all these things and mentally, because I actually, I mean, not to the point that I had to go in an institution or anything, but I did feel overwhelmed about everything. Every morning when I was waking up exhausted, I felt like the world was trying to kill me. And every night when I was going to bed exhausted, I just wanted to fall asleep and never wake up again. So you feel all those things, and those are things that you have to go through to break, that dark night of the soul that I talked about in the previous episodes. In a way, that was one of the things, really. And so when you come out of something like that, as I said before, you have two choices. And for me, the choice was, well, I never in my life want to feel like that again. And I need to take control of, and not in a controlling way, like we're not dealing with it and pushing it away, but actually need to understand what's going on and actually deal with it. And that, control how my emotions are working, why I'm feeling a certain way. And so that was a really important thing. But my mom didn't have the tools. And when she had a breakdown, she was in her 20s. And so she was very immature. In my 20s, the way I was coping with life was that I was partying a lot, having a lot of fun, and not taking life too seriously, and not really having a direction. In fact, by now, I should have been a doctor for 10 years, like really, and not just starting to study naturopathy. I should have had more direction, because those things that I'm doing now is the things that I always kind of loved. But again, I also was given a role, and my role was like, you're a strong person that is very opinionated, and you really should be either a lawyer or a diplomat. That, like, I wasn't given, what do you love doing? I was never asked, what do you love doing? What do you love? I would have said, I love the body. I love moving the body. I love exercise. I don't know. I wanted to understand the body because I had an eating disorder, and I wanted to know, how do I heal myself, and how do I actually not feel fat all the time, and not gain weight and lose weight and be on a diet all the time, which is also very exhausting. So I was going through a lot, and I didn't have the tools. And then I had this role where I had to deal with my shit, and then I had to deal with my mother's, because I was a mom. And so that really it was very much overwhelming. And I think a lot of my eating disorders came from that, not only because I was trying to cope with something, it was a coping mechanism, but actually because, again, I also mentioned before, but my mom had an eating disorder. She was bulimic. So I grew up seeing that. And I grew up being told that I was too strong and my sister was too, weak, but also not just personality wise, which is not true. But like physically, I was always athletic. She was always skinny, and skinny was the standard, right? Or you have to have skinny legs and you have to have skinny everything so that you're beautiful. Otherwise you're not beautiful. So it was like a continuous brainwashing programming. So how do you know in your 20s how to deal with everything? That's why I got to my 40s and it's just like exploded in my face. But not just that, because relationships keep on going. So my family relationship was what I mentioned. And then my friendships were always where I was trying to feel good enough and always giving, because I wasn't feeling good enough. And this happened also in my romantic relationships, where I always began a relationship giving, to the point that I just felt like I never was getting anything emotionally back, really. And I had to be the pragmatic person and strong, and I didn't have to be naggy. And at some point you just hit that wall. And again, 30, 40, I was like, I'm actually done with this, all of it, because I don't want to be that person and I cannot be that person because it didn't make me happy. Then I started learning more about my ancestral personality. I'm sorry, the Akashic records, and remembering certain things and feeling certain things and being connected to spirit in a certain way. And then actually also understanding my human design. And I'm a projector, which nobody would ever say. Someone would actually say you're a generator, maybe a manifester, because I do actually, funny enough, I can manifest. I really can without even trying. But it's more because sometimes I just pray for things to be aligned, and they are. And so I never give myself credit for it. And I don't think I really have credit for it anyway. I really think that God makes it happen when it's meant to. But at the same time, I'm a projector. So my whole life, actually, being a people pleaser makes a lot of sense. And the thing is that I need to learn how to not push to be accepted and wanted and loved and understood. And I have to just be open to things coming, accepting when they do, or not, because you don't have to, but being invited. That's actually the main thing with projectors. I wait for the invitation to help someone, because we healers mostly, to be available, so that you know when it is the right time, because if it's not the right time, you don't manage. So, my personal relationships have always been a one-sided relationships, all of them. And now, only now, I'm actually starting to figure out that I can't live like that, that I can't do this one-sided thing where I don't feel that actually my needs are being fulfilled. And it's not the material stuff, really just goes deep into like, do I know myself? So as I get to know myself, I actually realize that maybe the people around me, including my parents, don't actually know me. So if they don't know me, how can they give me what I want? And likewise for my partner, and my friends, and, well, in this case, I shouldn't say a partner because I'm my husband, like, but anyone, even business partners or friends. And business partners make sense because actually I had a couple of projects that I was working on with other people, and these partners didn't understand me because I didn't understand myself, and I wasn't very good at communicating either what I wanted or felt was right or wrong, because, well, I didn't really know how to put it into words, or I didn't feel that I had the right to put it into words. So this, I think, is a shift a lot of people that find in these relationships is very important to have with family, friends, and anyone in between. So one thing that I definitely realized when it comes to boundaries, which are very important for then having the right roles in families, is that in any relationship, is that boundaries are important because they allow you to know how far you can go, and to allow the other person to also know how far they can go within your space before you bite their heads off because they're taking over. But when you don't have any boundaries, that those people can just take over. And interestingly enough, last night I had a very, very, very telling dream, actually, which I don't want to share because it's not about me per se, but I dreamt about somebody that was in my sister's life who truly took over and had like no respect for boundaries, because my sister didn't have the boundaries that she should have had with this person. And it's funny how it came to me, and I wasn't actually even thinking about the episode because I knew I had to record something, but I was actually thinking about another topic for today. But I also wanted to do this episode at some point. So it was just a nudge I needed with that dream, because those boundaries are very important. Of course, there are different kinds of boundaries. There are boundaries that are very hard, which I tend to have. I had because when I started, healing from my crisis, because I realized that if I didn't have those boundaries, I could not deal with people that didn't have the boundaries. And so I think actually in certain situations, hard boundaries are key, and probably a good surviving tool, because if the people outside that boundary, outside in your life, but outside the boundary, don't understand what the boundaries, and it's not very strong, they overtake it because they don't understand what boundaries are. They feel like boundaries are wrong because you're saying no to something. And instead, boundaries are very important because you need to know what makes you happy. And then you have to be able to see that actually this makes me happy, this doesn't make me happy. You make me happy. Nobody can make you happy, but like you contribute to happiness or you don't contribute to happiness. This is why not. And have those boundaries that are very, very strong and defined so that you also can check in with yourself, because it's very easy, especially if you didn't grow up with healthy boundaries, to not remember sometimes and let it go, and then you're in the same situation. And so unless you want the same results, you have to change something. So with people that have no boundaries, I tend to have really hard boundaries, which are stable, like, no, you can't, no, I don't want to, like very, very hard. And with others that are healthy boundaries, like they have healthy boundaries and you can have healthy boundaries, it can be more of a compromise. That's how I feel about it. I might be wrong about it. There might be better ways to do it, of course. But this is how I started, and it's working for me. So this is why I don't have yet a relationship with my mom. And although I'm very proud of the work she's doing, and I have told her because I think she deserves to know it, I still need to have those hard boundaries with that person, because I feel that we're not in the right, I don't know, maybe it's fear, but I feel that we're not just yet where we can have a relationship where we both have good boundaries. And mostly because I don't know if she has created healthy boundaries yet. And so I would have to assume that she understands boundaries and respect them, which I don't want to do. I don't want to assume anything, because when I do, things go wrong. So I'm not assuming. And until I see it, then those relationships cannot exist. Although I did see she actually did create boundaries with some family members where she saw a behavior that didn't please her, and she literally stepped away from the situation. And that's good boundaries. And so that was another proud moment, because she's taking care of herself too. So I feel that those things are, necessary to learn, and nobody teaches us unless our parents are healthy parents who understand how to be parents. Then it's really, really hard to expect them to teach us the right boundaries if they don't even have them themselves. Which takes me to the next step, which is, people my age now are becoming parents if they're not already parents. And so one piece of advice is make sure that you deal with your trauma and you actually heal and you actually understand how to be a mature, accountable, responsible, non-victim person before you have children, for two very, very, very important reasons. One is that you need to be able to teach them roles, responsibilities, and boundaries. The other is when you're pregnant, so this is mostly for us women, your baby understands energetically everything you are going through. So if you get pregnant and you don't have boundaries, things make you unhappy, you're frustrated, you're stressed, you're unhappy. Guess who's going to feel all that? And when they come into this world with those feelings, they don't even know where those feelings are coming from, because they literally are built in their DNA at cellular level. And that can create a lot of acidosis, which can create a lot of diseases. So this is why, when studying naturopathy with Dr. Robert Morse, for example, it's such a dream, because he's one of the very, very few people that actually really understands mind, body, soul connection to a level that I truly never saw before. And that is beautiful, because that level, that kind of understanding of the effects, cause and effects of our actions, reactions, is so important. And so I feel that it's really key to learn that actually diseases don't, as I said at the beginning, don't only come from the food that we're having. You can have the best diet and still get sick. And they don't come from the environment, but actually come from these deeply rooted belief systems, and also just systems that we live in, our family dynamics, or even in our personal lives, and that either makes happy or not. And one of the things that I think a lot of doctors like Dr. Northrop maybe have even explored and noticed is that women, when they get to that age where we're going through perimenopause, the shit hits the fan, and you have to really deal with stuff, if they haven't dealt or are not dealing or coping with the dark night of the soul, they get sick, because the body reacts to those very deep feelings that we build, that we have. If we don't actually find out where they come from and deal with them, they will our body doesn't know that those feelings come from somewhere else. They don't know that even when we angry at somebody, that anger, the cells don't know that anger is, addressed to someone else. That the body's like, okay, you're angry. That's a negative feeling. I'm feeling it. I'm changing my structure. I'm changing the pH of my inner cellular fluid. The interstitial fluid around the cells changes pH. Everything becomes more acidic. That's where diseases foster. So it's very, very, very important. And I think it's scientific even because, pH is, there's two sides to chemistry. So you want to have a pH that is relatively alkaline to be able to have health. You can't have health in an acidic pH. So after having explored all those kind of things, I feel like any relationship, and I actually see a lot of women having relationships with their partners, whether they are boyfriend, girlfriend, casual, or maybe, those relationships you create with maybe someone that is not committal to you, they suffer and they don't say anything because they feel that they're not good enough to do that, to say, actually, this doesn't work for me. And they get sick. And then they're told that if they are actually speaking up about it, they're told they're emotional. Well, being emotional, first thing is actually a good thing because that means you're in touch with your emotions. Now, you don't want to be a victim to your emotions, like going crazy or losing control or shouting and screaming. Do it when you have to. Punch a pillow if you have to. Hey, get the shit out of your system for sure. But deal with the situation in a mature way, meaning if you really have to be honest with yourself, if something doesn't make you happy, you're the only one that can change it, which means you can stop it even if it hurts. And I mentioned in a very, very quick video on Instagram last week on Saturday when I did class that this came to me. Sometimes we are given the nudges to do something that is very much against what we want because, or feel like we want, because it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. But if you do it, the outcome is actually very powerful. And, God doesn't make mistakes. He's like, actually, I'm trying to communicate with you. I'm telling you something. And he's going to tell you by showing you. So the behavior of this person maybe doesn't change. It becomes worse and worse. So maybe they do that. There's a loop and you see that behavior being that loop. And at some point, if it really gets to you, it's time to change it. And if that person doesn't want to change, you have to, because there's only two people in this relationship and you have to make it like either work for you or step away from it, right? So unless you want to be miserable and continue to be miserable. So you have really those very, very few choices because we have to take responsibility. So that's one other thing I see, because again, if you do that, even in that relationship, you're creating roles. So your role becomes the understanding one, the one that doesn't leave, the one that doesn't quit, the one that is supportive, the one that holds it together, and the other person is irresponsible, uncaring, does whatever they want, lies. I mean, you name it, they can do it. So what do you want, right? So in these relationships, it's really, really important to also have boundaries. And again, I think there may be people that get in the relationship, get in situations like this. But it's also in work, by the way. Like a boss can treat you just the same way. And if you don't put down your boundaries, you're exactly doing the same. You're ending up in the same place. So this is not just for romantic relationships or for family. It's any relationship. It's any dynamic between two or more human beings. So those are very, very key points to take into consideration. And again, I'll go back to talking about women for women, because again, my practice is all about really working mostly with women, which I prefer. I've been helping a few men lately, but I don't love it. And the energy is very different. I love working with women. They are much more, I think, in tune. And also, I really believe that because women have been suppressed for so many years, it's time to rise now and fulfill roles that men will never, ever have, because the power of the feminine that allows creation to happen, not just having babies, but like in general, the energetics, you can't fake it. Like it was being put down for too long. And this is why the enemy is always looking at ways to actually undermine the feminine and always push, negative and toxic masculinity on everybody. Men need to be this way. They need to be macho. They need to be strong. They can flirt. They can do whatever they want. Women stay home. Don't do anything because if you do, you're a slut. you don't say anything, because if you do, you're too feisty, and then you're PMS, you're too emotional. I mean, it's like, can we just what? It's like the undermining of feminine, and that's not how it should be. We are powerful, we are strong, but we're also very good leaders, and we are very good game changers. And as Lauren was saying not last episode, this is probably an overused word, but we are game changers, because you change the game by changing yourself and actually dealing with that dark night of the soul and reclaiming your role. So roles are important, especially not just in family, and not especially, but not just in family, but I think especially at a global level, at a human level, for women to understand their role. So take your role back in a positive way, because we also don't want women, we've seen the rise of women that are so masculine. It's like, what are we doing? We're not changing anything. If these women looking people then behave like men, let's just be women, because the energetics of the female, of the feminine energy is strong, but is also nurturing, is, can fight back, but is also grounded and soft. And that's a balance that is really, really hard to find, because when you just don't have the patience and you don't have the right environment, and someone is pushing, you just want to lose it and be like, and then they call you neurotic, which you're not. It's just that the environment is very, very toxic. So we have to learn how to grasp that positive feminine, and not be weak, and not be too silent, and not be submissive, which is part of a very unbalanced feminine, by the way. And at the same time, we don't want to become too masculine, because we also have masculine energy within us. I'm not saying we don't. We actually need it as strength, that grounding, that responsibility and accountability. That's all masculine energy. You have to take it. You have to take it into, like, in your arsenal, and use it. And also, and same goes for men, by the way. Men that are too macho and don't have any feminine, or men that perhaps don't have any strength, like masculine strength, and they're very soft. So there are imbalances everywhere, and anybody and everybody has to work on it if they really want to grow. And I don't think this is for everyone. I'll be honest. Some people are just maybe are very young souls, and they're supposed to be here skipping around the planet doing whatever they want without taking responsibility. It's a shame that they affect other people, but maybe that's really the case. And then there are people that are meant to really make strides forward. And given the times we're in, I think we're talking about the healers of this world are definitely people that are gonna take responsibility, accountability, and remember and connect, and actually understand the order of things in nature and in spirit world and in everything that surrounds us, and not just think that we're here to wake up, go to work, and do things that 9 to 5 to make some money. Money is important, and again, very masculine energy money, negative, like a very toxic masculinity money, because it's become like, we love it so much that we have to have it. The truth is, surrender to spirit, surrender to God, and I can tell you that you'll always have everything you need. And having $1 million in the bank doesn't make you happy. It really doesn't make you happy. It won't make you happy. Also, because to get there, how much tax do you have to pay? So not worth it. But also, like, what do you have to do? Because, so I don't know. I'm coming from a very personal place here. Like, when I used to work in banking, I was very comfortable financially, but I didn't love it. And I woke up every morning thinking that my life really had to have something more. And, and then this year is the first time I actually I took courage, and I decided in a very short time. Well, this actually wasn't a short time. I took action in a short time, but this was something that was in my mind for many years, and then really much more tangibly for a few months, to have a space for myself. And you know how much patience I have to learn how to have, like another trait of feminine, because I rented 2 weeks ago, and just the patience of waiting for the aircon to be changed, or waiting for the handyman to do everything. I mean, or even finding someone reliable to come, never mind actually the handyman doing it, but just that patience to be like, okay, I wanted to do it now. Like, I wanted to do it. I wanted everything to be done like yesterday, but I have to be patient. And so I'm like, okay, the last 2 weeks I've been like going around buying things, and then like making sure everything I need, it's there. We're gonna put it together next week, and then I'm going to take just the time to start promoting and talking to the right people from a place of like, balance, because I need to be like in the space to feel it so I can translate it to other people. And then I'm sure that it will start coming, because things just happen when you are in the right flow. And I know it's the right flow. I just feel it. And I also, I'm saying to myself, I need to try this. And if it works, it's because I'm in the flow. If it doesn't work, there's a message and a lesson there. This, what I'm doing here, I could never ever have done it in London, because in London it would have been impossibly expensive and very risky. Where I am now, at least I know that it's not too risky. But at the same time, I want it to work, and not because of money. Because again, the driver cannot be something toxic. The driver is positive impact and the positive feminine, which is healing other people or allowing other people to find their pathway to a healing situation so that they can make change happen. So it's really, really important to have that awareness and do it for the right reasons so that it can flow. So I'm really hoping that that's the case in this case as well. And that's, you learned, like, the message that comes to me is you learn so much, you're really good at what you do, go out there and actually help people where they needed to be helped. And that's exactly what I think I am. So that's, again, creating that feminine shift and knowing my role, what's my role, and in society and in life and with other people, and then in my relationships. And, sometimes they come with a shaky territory, because when you change something, other people will feel unsettled and you will feel unsettled. And, you have to deal with it and you have to work through it and understand what that means for everyone. And then make sure you're happy so that you can do good, because ultimately we all have a mission, and we cannot fulfill a mission if we are sad, upset, in the wrong place. So that's really the message, I think, for today's episode about boundaries and roles and how important they are to have, and why, if you are interested in finding more about it, do it. Like, just, there's so much out there about boundaries, healthy boundaries, but in any relationship. So there's a podcast, actually, it's for romantic relationships. If you want to talk about romantic relationship, Jillian on Love is a really good podcast with a relationship expert coach who really gives good advice and is really good at that. So if that's your thing, there are other business. Marie Forleo has good business advice, very much focused on boundaries. And I really feel like she has a very good podcast as well to follow. If you want to work with me, I'm open. I work mostly on healing the body first, so this temple that we have our soul in, and then going deeper into the other aspects as well to kind of align everything. So and working with that, the beautiful divine feminine, and bringing it into our being, to our state of being. And so, yeah, I'm also available. So all the details, even the podcast I mentioned, I put in the show notes so that you can go and check them out. And guys, thank you for staying today, for listening to me. And if you want to share, review, that will help us grow. And of course, as always, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but you can also support the channel by purchasing the Dr. Robert Morse's herbs from the link below. There is a discount code of 5% that is valid one time. So if you use it for a big purchase. And I vouch for these herbs myself, because I take them, and you can see on my Instagram, I'm actually taking them now. And I love them. They work perfectly. The actual compositions are beautifully made. They are all organic. You feel the difference when you take them. So I would suggest, if you want to take them, also to talk to me about what kind of diet to go on, how to do it properly, because you don't want to waste money. You want to have it. You want to take those pills while you're eating the right things and looking after yourself. And, especially because if we don't have extreme disease, we can have more flexibility and do it in a much more balanced way. And and you can also check out my farm here in Portugal, where we are hosting retreats. And if you're a healer, a teacher, you can also come and host retreats here. Next year, we have the availability to host you and support you in delivering a beautiful experience to your clients. So get in touch. Everything is in the show notes, and I'll see you next week. Bye.